Welcome to Influence and Insight, the podcast that delves into the inspirations and influences on senior marketing leaders. I'm here today with Pete Markey, who is former CMO of Boots. Pete, welcome to the podcast. Pete, maybe we could start by you just sort of talking me through your career, your background, and the highlights.
No worries. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a real privilege to be on this amazing podcast. So I've done a variety of different marketing jobs, starting in British Gas, where I started right at the bottom, working on managing some early sort of marketing and sales campaigns, selling exciting products like gas, electricity, and boiler cover. I then got into the automobile game, working for the AA, doing marketing campaigns for them, and then into telco, broadband, and mobile phones before getting into financial services, where I love my time running marketing for more than car insurance, van insurance, pet insurance, all those wonderful insurance products. I had a global job for that insurance company, and then went into retail, back into insurance, a bit of banking across Post Office and Aviva, and most recently at Boots. But I think the bit for me that's been exciting across all those is always working in brands that are passionate about their customer and designed to deliver on their brand promise and deliver the very best for their customers, and great marketing along the way.
Great, and I'm sure some of the work you've done at those brands will come out throughout the course of the conversation. But before that, I want to sort of go back, and this podcast is very much about uncovering the influences that have driven people that aren't necessarily career related. Pete, you've said before your creative journey started in 1977 with seeing, as it was then called, Star Wars, now Star Wars: A New Hope. Can you sort of tell me a bit about this and the impact that had on you as a child?
Yeah, well, Star Wars was my earliest sort of childhood memory, to be honest. So I was about 4 years old at the time. And I just remember going in the car at the cinema and just being blown away by this massive spaceship that arrives on the screen at the start of the film, and being transported to this magical world with characters and lightsabers and good versus evil and spaceships. And as a 4 or 5 year old, it was just this incredible sort of blow your mind experience. And it really awoke something in me, this sort of creative spark that if someone like George Lucas could create this amazing world, could I create that world? Could I create too? And it started with playing with the action figures, and I got more into science fiction, things like Doctor Who and Buck Rogers at the time, and Star Trek. And I started writing stories and engaging more in the community. And it really lit this spark in me around what creative excellence could look like. You know, we as human beings have the capacity to create wonderful, amazing things, and amazing escapism and amazing art. And I got excited that maybe I could be part of that too. So yes, it lit the flame.
Mm. I mean, it's got that intro, obviously the orchestral sort of blast, then the text going down the screen, and then obviously, as you say, that shot of the small ship and then the huge one kind of filling the screen. I mean, do you think that type of creativity and storytelling can be sort of mapped onto the business world, onto marketing, which I suppose has more distinctive priorities and sort of operates in maybe in narrower lanes than that?
I think it can, definitely, because I think at the heart of some of the best adverts or the best content for brands we remember is a great story and great creativity. I think about the adverts I grew up with and the ads I gravitate towards now, even some of the ads at Christmas, the ones you remember have a great story to them, things that really connect with you. I also think advertising is its own art, because look, Star Wars is brilliant, but it's, what is it, an hour and a half long? Yeah, in ads, you have to tell a story in 30 seconds. At most probably 60 or 90. So the craft of telling a story in under a minute is incredible. And when you're making it and filming it, the knowledge that you have to tell the story in a short space of time is quite a sort of weight of responsibility. So I think it can translate across. You need great storytelling for brands. That's how you connect people with brands. It's how you show you're relevant, how you connect your audience with you. And it's how you build that trust and connection and loyalty over time. The brands that I think we've seen that have faded away in recent years are ones that have lost relevance. That both their offerings lost relevance, but I'd argue their advertising has become recessive and irrelevant in people's lives. We want slightly disruptive creative. We want new ideas. We want things that connect with us and make us sit up and take notice, particularly in a world where our attention span is shorter than a goldfish now, and we have so many things that we could focus on. Something that really grabs you, connects with you, and creates a moment with you, I think it's what great advertising's got to be about.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Star Wars is working with this kind of fantastical world, but George Lucas has talked about how he used sort of storytelling fundamentals, I think, so that there's the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, I think, that he refers to, and it's this cycle where the hero is called to adventure. There's a wise sage, all these kind of confrontation with the villain, all these sorts of things. But I think there's an interesting thing here with brands and advertising that I suppose maybe brands think of themselves as heroes in the story, whereas actually, maybe they should be more like the wise sage. Does this sort of resonate with you at all? That sort of storytelling, and how do you kind of situate the customer within the story you're telling?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? I worry if your brand is too much the hero in your work, because I do think there's a level of humility that has to come to your brand that acknowledges the role you play in people's lives. And one of the things I worked hard to do in my time at Boots was that we were positioning ourselves as a solution to a real customer need. So we weren't just sort of preaching about what we did. It was, here's a customer need and here's what we're doing to answer that. So if I look at the first campaign I did at Boots, which was Feel Good as New in the spring, summer of 2021, that was about things that Boots offered on health and beauty as people were coming out of the COVID lockdown. And there were great solutions Boots offered, but we're providing this service in response to this bit of insight is people are getting back to normal in their lives again. We've got what you need. And I think as a brand in storytelling, you have to have that fusion of a real customer insight and need with something your brand provides. Then you become, in inverted commas, the hero, but only because you're answering a customer need. You're not sort of the hero for the sake of it. So I think great work, great creative work in advertising positions your brand that way, which is there's a customer truth and problem, and you are part of the answer to that in a clever, creative, engaging way. The journey of storytelling is something I've also learned through improvised comedy, that ability to have to tell a story with highs and lows in it. And the best adverts do that too.
Mm-hmm. And there's been talk around creative consistency recently, and Star Wars, is an interesting example, I think, of where there's sort of first three films considered to be, universally as classics, but then you sort of move from, the great intros of the first one, rebel ships have stolen plans for the Death Star, to, the taxation of trade routes is in dispute or whatever that you end up with in the Phantom Menace. Do you think there are any lessons there for creativity? That you've still got this great idea underpinning it all, but maybe it's sort of they've lost control of it. They've lost what made it appealing to people, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a very controversial opinion, isn't it? So if you ask my son grew up with Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3, so he thinks some of them are classics.
That's the thing. Phantom Menace was probably the same. I was probably roughly the same age you were for New Hope, but it's obviously the reputation of it hasn't sort of lasted in the same way, has it?
It's true. I think your question's a great one. I think you've always got to have a bit of soul to your work, and that for me is around your brand and your brand purpose. You've got to know what you're about. So I think Star Wars, for me, sort of has lost a bit of its heart along the way in some of the executions of it, where it's sort of lost the fundamentals of what made it special and unique. And you always have to hold true to that. I think you can take the story in different directions, but you have to know who you are, what you're for and what you're about, and what makes you special and connects you in people's lives. And it's so true with brands. I think that I'll give you a love. So Asda is an interesting example. So Asda, supermarket in the UK, known for low cost, good quality food and shopping, in the last couple of years has lost its way and suddenly has come back to this tapping the back pocket and Asda value and rollback, because it's gone, oh golly, it's woken up and gone, oh, with this thing, and it tried to be something else. And I do think that's where brands or content or programmers lose that thread. You lose your audience, you disconnect from them. I'd argue, I think Marvel have been on a bit of that journey too, with the quality of content varying and losing an audience, and you can see that in box office receipts. You have to stay true. You can evolve where you are, but you can't fundamentally move that far away from why people love you and like you in the first place. And that's as true of a brand like, say, a Boots or some of the other brands I've worked on, as it is true of Star Wars today. And so maybe you and I can go and fix Star Wars together on the back of this podcast. So if anyone's listening, we are available.
Just drawing some of the references you mentioned, I think you've self-identified before as a geek, you've said, around sci-fi and things like that. And I'm kind of interested in that as a personality type of someone who is interested in sci-fi and in whatever it might be, that aren't normal sort of traits within a large corporate world like Boots. How do you sort of find that fit? Have you had to adjust your personality, adopt characteristics to your personality that maybe you didn't have before?
Yeah, it's funny, it's got easier, that geek journey, to be honest. I think I probably hit it a bit more early on in my career, because to start with, you think, God, do I really want to admit to people that I love sci-fi? And over time, it just sort of ekes out of you, and you go, this is kind of part of me. And I don't mind saying I love Star Wars. I don't mind saying I love Doctor Who, because it's sort of part of who I am. So I'm sort of the less embarrassed geek now. And I do think as well now, as the bit for me is really changing my career, is how leaders are the leaders you love working for, the ones where you can connect with them at a human interpersonal level. And I think the more people know about you and the things you love and the things you enjoy outside of work as much as in work, I think it helps people relate to you more as a leader. So I've let go of some of that, I guess, my own baggage around it, and gone, okay, I am what I am. I'm a leader in business. I'm a parent. I'm a sci-fi fan. I'm whatever, and that's part of me, and that's kind of cool, and that's okay. And actually, I found it's made me. This is about me personally. Anyone in this situation makes you more interesting to talk to, because it gives people a way in to go. So I go to Comic Cons, for example. So people find that interesting that I do that, and so they'll ask me about it. So I don't think there's anything to hide now. And if anything, I think it enriches you as a leader and a person. The balance is as anyone would do, you've still got to show up in a really professional way at work and deliver. And then I think it gives you permission to dial up those quirky bits of your personality, to be more creative, to be fun, engaging, to talk about those bits as well, because it's part of your success factor if you're delivering in your work. So yeah, don't hide that about yourself. Make it part of your DNA, and use that as to, I guess, to almost explain why you are delivering in such a positive way in the business you're in.
Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, I mean, some people, obviously, you've mentioned Rory Sutherland being a sort of industry hero of yours, and obviously he springs to mind as someone who's really thrived by building that unconventional persona, I suppose. The cravats, everything. It all sort of creates this image of someone who does challenge thinking, and that goes with, obviously, how he approaches his job. So, I mean, do you have any tips for people to kind of lean into their own quirks, eccentricities, to make them to sort of work in that environment, I suppose?
Yeah, I think the starting point is and Rory's a great example. I don't want to start encoding saying, who am I? It sounds very basic, of sort of, what's your personal brand? What is there in your makeup of who you are, the things you love, the things that drive you in work and out of work? And I start by writing it down, saying, this is me. And then I think you can start to dial up aspects of it as you are in every day within your business life. There'll be things you can relate to or draw out, or just bits people ask you about. And it doesn't mean you need to be full-on eccentric, and that's brilliant if you are, but it might just be bits about your life, about a hobby or an aspect of you that is just a really good thing to dial up, that allows people to relate to you better or more. Or something you can draw into your business life because it's an experience that you or a family member or friend have had that relates to what that business does. So, but I start with decoding it now.
And at the same time, I think you've mentioned in the past, obviously there are those sort of hard leadership skills around sort of, the difficult conversations, assertion, things like that. Are those, have you had to, has that been a journey for you at all? Have you consciously sort of adopted more of those kinds of traits?
I think you have to, yeah. It's another good question. I think that's been a journey for me. I was a lot less assertive and confident earlier on in my career, but you learn by taking the plunge, and I'd encourage everyone to throw themselves into things that they find complicated or difficult or challenging, because it's a great way to learn and get outside your comfort zone, and you get noticed for it. So this is a random example, but when I first started my career at British Gas, I sat next to the internal comms team, and they knew that I wanted to work more closely with them. So someone came up to me one day and said, Pete, would you like to dress up as a life-size goldfish for a conference we've got tomorrow? So orange tights, orange shoes, big goldfish costume, run through the crowd, high-fiving people, telling them about the goldfish credit card we're launching. So I decided I was going to do that. And so I suddenly was in this leadership conference with all these senior directors high-fiving them dressed as a life-size goldfish. Now, I then got known as the goldfish guy, because people were like, who was the guy in the suit? Well, that was Pete Markey, did it? And so I just use that as a small example of actually, there are things in any business, there's a goldfish moment when you can put your hand up and say, well, I'll do that. And these things get you noticed and spotted. And I think create moments of conversation and that led to all sorts of opportunities, even such a silly moment like that. So yes, you can find those moments, but you have to really put yourself out, push yourself to do those bits. And assertiveness, I think, comes from knowing who you are, being confident in who you are, and not feeling afraid to express an opinion, even if you may get shouted down or you may get supported, and that comes with confidence too. I early on in my career, I was too much of a yes man. It was too much like, well, yes, I'll do that, yes, I'll do that, and I've learned in that early part of my career to get better at saying no, or to challenge and ask questions. That really helps. Don't feel afraid to ask questions. There's jobs I've done I wished I'd asked more questions. Asking questions is smart. However silly you feel, ask questions. Be curious about everything you're doing. And that will help build your confidence and your assertiveness in any business you're in. And then you're seen, I think, as adding incredible value if you're curious about the business you're in and make it better.
Great. So onto the sort of second influence that you've touched on already around improv comedy. So can you just sort of tell me a bit about that, how that began, and maybe just for the audience, what does it even mean? What is improv comedy?
Okay. So first of all, improvised comedy is not stand-up comedy, right? So it's not. So stand-up is a person on a stage with a set routine, and they do an amazing job making people laugh. So it's not stand-up. It's improvised, which is literally completely made up. You're always on a stage with at least one other person, and you are literally building a scene that didn't exist before with one or more people that you hope you're going to make funny. And the audience gives you suggestions, like you and I are sat together on a desert island where two brothers are on holiday, and then bang, we create a scene together. And the way it works is you build on each other's ideas. There's a technique called yes and. So you would say, Pete, it's brilliant to be on the beach with you. And I'd say, yes and, it's so good, we're going to go and buy an ice cream together and go on the fun fair. Now, the opposite of yes and is no. So you could say, Pete, it's brilliant to be on the beach. And I say, no, I hate the beach. Let's go to outer space. I've immediately killed the scene. I've killed the whole idea. And the audience look at me as that guy's a really silly muppet because he's killed the scene. Whereas yes and goes, we're in the world, we're on the beach together with brothers, and we're going to create some fun together. So that's improv comedy. I started it around 6 years ago, queuing up to do something very boring, which was to buy a train ticket at the station. There was a poster there, and I thought, you know what, I like the sound of that. I like the sound of doing something new, learning something new, and seeing what it's all about. I've just fallen in love with it because it gets a different bit of your brain working. You're having to play like you did as a kid. You're always creating new ideas on the spot, creating scenes, and it's given me a really interesting, diverse friendship group to work with too, who are very different to me, all sorts of walks of life, and we create fun scenes and things together. And we do a show in front of about 100 people once a month, which is an amazing experience. And to up it all, about a year ago, I started musical improv where you make up songs. And I'm not a natural singer. I will not be singing for you on this podcast. Everyone will be very pleased to hear. But you make up music. So 2 months ago, I was part of a group that performed a made-up, improvised 25-minute musical. None of that existed. Not a single note or word or bit of that musical existed before we stood on stage. And we had to improvise that and make it up for 25 minutes. Loads of fun. So improv really exercises that extra bit of your brain, the creative part, that team building, working with each other, developing ideas, and thinking on your feet, which I think is important in life as much as it is on stage, and important in business too.
And I suppose taking this into business then, so that sort of environment where you've got the collaborative environment you've emphasised, and also quite free, and also quite broad parameters, I suppose, to experiment within. How do you sort of does that have you been able to bring that into the marketing departments in places you worked?
You definitely can. There's an amazing book actually for anyone listening called The Art of Making Shit Up by Norm Lavioletti. It's a really good read. Norm Lavioletti was an improviser who's done what I'm going to describe. He's taken the techniques of improv into business. And I think the way you do that is improv is a great way to help free your mind when you're trying to do some creative thinking. So you might be developing a new product or service or experience, or trying to get breakthrough when your business is going through challenges. The techniques to do things like yes and, to listen to each other, to build on each other's ideas, to open your mind to create, are hugely unlocking. So in TSB and Boots, which are over the period in which I've learned improv, I've been able to get my team or teams around me trained in improvisation. And it certainly helped us unlock all sorts of new ideas around products, services, ways to market, ways to see breakthrough when you're grappling with tough market conditions. And it is just very freeing. It's also, for my lead team at Boots, I had them all trained in improv. Before I left Boots, the entire team had a workshop on improvisation. And you could see how freeing it was. The other example I'd give is 5 years ago, I persuaded 9 other marketing directors or CMOs to join me to learn improv for 8 weeks with the person, Ed Pithy from Dingbats Improv, who teaches me, to learn improv and then put on a show for Comic Relief. We did that. It was for about 150 people. We raised £30,000 for Comic Relief. And just seeing the journey all 10 of us then went through learning improv as marketeers, how freeing it was for those people. And I know they still use those techniques today, even 5 years on, because they found them so freeing, so liberating. And it allowed them to bring more of themselves, but also more creative thinking to their workplace. So yeah, I think it's invaluable, really is.
And obviously you mentioned TSB there, and I suppose compared to Boots, there's, well, obviously Boots in the pharmacy business has regulation as well, but maybe compared to other consumer businesses, TSB is obviously subject to lots of compliance. Nowadays there's the consumer duty in financial services. So I suppose there are all these kind of narrowing influences within financial services that maybe constrain that creativity. Would you sort of have any advice for people in that sector?
Yeah, I think for me it would be, I think that regulation and the boundaries around things are there for a reason, and I think you never want to push too hard in the wrong direction on those. But I do think you need to, even within those boundaries, you need to be able to push your brand creatively. And so, Nationwide, for example, clearly have a very clear direction approach with what they're doing with their campaign and challenging the big banks. I know people might love that work, they might not love that work, but it's memorable and impactful. And I think what they've done is really push that brand to say, here's our principle, here's what we stand for, and there's a creative way to express it that has edge and ambition. And I don't think there is much other creative work now in financial services that is that memorable or different or has that edge or ambition. It's all a bit too, it's gone the other direction. It's almost too safe. And look, you always want to be within the constraints of regulation, but I do think you can still create work that's interesting and fun and engaging. The last campaign I did at TSB in 2021 had David Schwimmer from Friends in, and he was ad-libbing. He was improvising parts of the script, and we were having to send bits back to the regulatory and compliance team saying, can you now sign this off, which they were great at, but would give some compliance teams a bit of a headache. And that campaign for me is still one of the best FS campaigns that I've seen and worked on, because it was fun, it got people talking. And he talked about loans and current accounts in a really engaging, interesting way that made people laugh and smile. So I think you can still, within those parameters, create amazing, engaging and interesting work. But you have to push yourselves, you have to have the right mindset, and you have to work with agency partners willing to do it too. And you have to say, I'm going to make work that's interesting, that's going to really connect with people, that they're going to care about and talk about. So I would love to lead the charge on making FS creative more exciting again. I think it's lost some of that edge and interest now that I think it needs back again, particularly the big banks. I think some really interesting creative ideas that could be unlocked if we all thought differently.
So obviously in marketing there's more of a pressure to prove ROI, and that sometimes pushes marketers towards performance marketing rather than big brand campaigns with David Schwimmer and things like that. So how can marketers sort of make that argument for brand in this environment?
So first of all, I think performance channels are great, aren't they? You can measure them really quickly, you can go back to the business and prove the return. So get good at those first. Prove as a marketing team you're delivering full on, full out in all those areas, because that shows a team that's well run, I think, and really delivering everything they can and sweating those assets for the business. But don't stop there, because that, I think, gives you the platform to say, we've got so much growth, but to get to the next level, we need to do more. Amazon's a great example. So I was told years ago when I worked last in insurance, oh, Amazon don't advertise on TV. And what had happened a minute later? They did. Because Amazon reached a point of going, we've gone so far with the channels we've got that you need something else to reach and connect with audiences. Hence, they end up on TV and more cross video in terms of what they did. So I think that's the platform to say we've reached a certain audience level, we've reached a certain level of performance. The only way we can grow is really to push harder on the brand lens. That doesn't always need to be TV, but could be TV, cinema, radio, out of home, all of those in the mix to help you then drive the next level of growth. The way I'd build the case is work with your media agency or relevant partner to help you build the case up, because they've got access to the audience data. So the first Christmas I was in Boots, in 2021, I was challenged really hard on we should just be doing paid search at Christmas. And what I was able to show is if you just did that, you only reach a small subsection of the population. There are about another 80% of the population you would miss if you just went on digital channels like paid search alone. If you open it up to TV, cinema, radio, out of home, suddenly you connect with audiences, some of whom only shop in Boots once a year. You connect with them in a different way. So there's an audience lens to this, but also I think there's a business growth imperative thing of we'll only grow so far. We're here, and the only way to get to here is that more of a brand step change. So work with your partners, build the case up, but get darn good at your day-to-day and performance to prove before you even go and have those conversations that you've got the knitting, the raw ingredients of performance marketing running. Then you can push for more.
Obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI recently. What are your sort of views on it, and what marketers need to know about it, maybe?
Everywhere I go, I'm asked about AI. I've yet to meet anyone, myself included, who's got a perfect solution or answer, even from an agency background. But I think we can at least be doing things now that I think are moving us in a direction where AI is helping us as a marketing community. So things like basic copywriting, whether in emails or subject headers, visual creative. So Boots, I said no AI people, no AI hands or feet or whatever, because we're a health and beauty brand. But we use AI to create a beach, for example, or a background setting. So you can use AI creatively there. I think you use AI for better brief writing, better report writing, because AI is ingesting things like your research data. So I think for me as a marketer, you can use AI to help you with those labor-saving tasks of things that you could therefore get AI to do, and your job could become far more interesting and more strategic and thoughtful. So I think that's, for me, that's the way it's heading at the minute. AI can help with some of the core creative tasks, can help with some of the basic more brief writing, copywriting and production, and then it allows you as a marketer to be far more thoughtful and strategic around where are we going, what's next, what activities should we be doing, what's the next approach we need to take to win against our competitors, and let AI help you more in some of the day-to-day tasks. But I think now's the moment to do that. Now's the moment to partner, work with the right agencies, look at testing some of the right tools, and get ahead. Get ahead as a marketing team, get your team ahead, and don't get caught and fall behind. I think you've got to have your finger on the pulse with this technology, 100%.
Mm. And you mentioned before about brand and sort of activating that across different channels. And I think that segues nicely into sort of a third influence you mentioned, which was Interbrand, and their study around activating brand purpose, and they view that as sort of a multifaceted thing. Can you sort of talk about that and the influence that's had on you?
Yeah, happy to. This is my favourite model of all time in marketing, so I could talk forever about this model. Often when you look at a bit of work on brand purpose or brand strategy, a business will look at you and say, that's great, when's the campaign coming out? You've got to a new positioning or end line, when does the ad launch? And that gets it all stuck in a box called communications and storytelling. We do it every day in marketing. It's the nuts and bolts of the great work that great marketing teams do. But what Interbrand would argue is if it gets stuck there, just in what marketing do, it's less effective and your business does not achieve the growth and does not win against competitors like it needs to. So they've got three other boxes. Yes, they've got communications and storytelling, but they've also got products and services. So what your business sells and what it does that bring your purpose to life too? The third one is environment and channels. Does your website, do your shops or branches for banks bring your purpose to life too? And then lastly, but not least, people and culture. Do the people that work in your business, does the culture of the business scream out what you're about and what you do? And Interbrand would argue if you do all of those things consistently, then your purpose is real to the customer, real to your staff, and that then helps you drive growth. And I've used it now in 3 or 4 businesses, and it is super powerful because it shows that marketing have a job to do with the brand, but the job of your brand purpose coming to life and being real is a job of all the business, not just marketing.
And can you talk about how you activated that in a business then?
Yeah, so the best example is TSB in a financial services context. So Life Made More, which was our purpose and still is the brand's purpose. That was based on the insight that if you're in control of your money, on top of your money, you've got confidence with your money, your life can be more fulfilling because it helps you free you up to live life, a more fulfilling life. And so we built a whole set of things around that. A new current account that helped you save money as you spend, a new home insurance product that you only paid for the things you needed, a new in-store experience that was not just visually different, but brought to life steps to manage your money, and hints, tips, and content through social media and online too, all around money confidence and allowing your life to be made more. So yeah, and also that affected HR and the people we hired in the business too. So it became a 360-degree bit of work to properly make it real in the business and make it live and breathe. And I think that's what you need. And at Boots, it was about with you for life. Again, similar thing. We launched new products, services, improve the website, change the stores. So it just shows a business taking it seriously in a grown-up way if you've got that level of ambition and that level of engagement right across the business, not just from marketing.
Great. So we've talked about the past. We've talked about your career across these different organisations. What's next for you? What are you hoping for from the next move in the next few years?
So I think anyone, at any point in their career, you want a challenge, don't you? So I think never move jobs for the sake of it. I think move because there's something that's going to move you forwards, teach you new things, and help you grow as a leader and a human being. And so for me, the next job is I'm looking for a knotty challenge. I'm looking for something that I can really get my teeth stuck into, that is stretching and challenging, but fun and rewarding. And in the sense of you're seeing a business move forwards because of your intervention and the intervention of your team. So yes, I always gravitate towards those interesting challenges where you can have the most impact and the most impact quickly. And I love sectors I've worked in before. I'd gladly go back into them again. But I've also enjoyed jumping into sectors like retail and banking at the time that I'd never done before. So yes, the combination of newness and an exciting brief and an exciting opportunity to learn something new, I think that's what would be enticing right now.
Great. Okay. And our final thing is the quickfire round. So
okay.
I've got 3 questions. So Pete, what is your desert island disc? You're only allowed 1. I know it's usually 5.
So my all-time favourite film is Back to the Future. I love things connected to time travel, and I remember the effect as a kid seeing that film of just this idea that you could have gone back in time and met your parents and hang out with them. For me, was this very cool concept. So I'd pick The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News, because the minute that song kicks in and Marty McFly is on his skateboard hanging on the back of that truck, it was like personified 80s coolness. I was rubbish on the skateboard, but I always dreamt I could be Marty. And the minute I hear that song, it takes me back to 85 and back into that wonderful moment and great storytelling again. So yeah, I always go back there with that song.
Great. And your sort of guilty pleasure secret TV program or film?
So I've really got into Death in Paradise, which is a BBC show, and as a spin-off, Beyond Paradise. And I've discovered I really like these BBC-esque murder mysteries where you sort of have a fun bunch of people with different quirky personalities solving crime each week. It gets my brain going. But I love the way these characters are developed. I think often people are critical of these sort of soap opera-esque shows. I blooming love them. So I'm binge watching. There's about 14 series of Death in Paradise. I'm only on series 5, so we've got a long way to go. It's taken me about 20 years to catch up with it. But yeah, I can recommend it highly. If you like soap-esque fun characters and solving murder mysteries each week, Death in Paradise for you.
Great, okay. And from TV to literature, who's your favourite literary character of all time?
Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes. And back to that previous question, that connection of solving puzzles and crimes. I particularly loved Arthur Conan Doyle's short stories are amazing. And I've still got a volume of them, of all of them at home. And I think his longer forms like How do the Baskervilles are great. But the short stories are so great. How do you wrap up this mystery, get your brain going and move the audience in a slightly different, tricky direction? Then he does it brilliantly. So yeah, if not him, it would have to be Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot for exactly the same reasons. Yes, love a good murder mystery.
Great. Well, we'll finish off there. But Pete, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.